new Deliver news? Manish, I'm assuming you saw tons of it too with like the Deliver Shopify acquisition finally going through. How crazy that is.
Yeah, I mean, we're watching, we're observing. I mean, I think from our perspective, we provide a more universal service for our clients
Right.
that want to sell everywhere. But I know we're live, so I'll shut up right now.
Oh, that's all right.
No, yeah, we're just waiting for everyone to kind of filter in. That's, point of these two. These are kind of like a webinar masterclass, but it's very informal, give you guys a chance to kind of talk as well. Because sometimes actually the best gold nuggets come out of those sort of informal banter.
100%. Yeah, that's the most fun ones. We I was just gonna mention, yeah. So like, it was super cool. You probably saw it too, like the whole like Deliver grow up, which I thought was super interesting. Like, from like 2017 onward, it's crazy. Like Michelle, did you end up like, I'm assuming you heard all the news too, but like it was super cool to see like their growth journey, like over the past 3 or 4 years. It's insane with Shopify.
No,
It was really cool. The gentleman's name was Michael, and he like co-founded the whole system. And I spoke to him like ages ago to like learn about the company, and then obviously things kind of got crazy and blew up, and now they're officially part of Shopify. Just like a new promo video come out, so it's a pretty cool play that they're going into with Shopify, which is probably a whole other conversation we can get into.
Blair, if you have a couple of those videos or articles, if you don't mind sharing, I'd appreciate that. I don't know if I have seen it.
Yeah. They just announced it. I think it was like 2 hours ago or something. Crazy. I think it was, and their stock plummeted. So the Shopify stock actually went down. I think it was an earnings report, but then also right with the acquisition. So it was 2.1 billion they bought it for. I'm just sharing the link over here as well. Crazy. Absolute mayhem.
Interesting.
Yeah, so.
All right. Well, then that'll definitely, I think, come into play a little bit later on as we get into sort of off Amazon logistics and fulfillment as well. So yeah, I see. Okay, so we've got some people filtering in here. Don't know if we wanted to kind of start introductions.
Sure.
Let's
do it.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is being recorded, and you will get a copy of it. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and pop them into the chat, and we will have Blair and Manish take those on a little bit later on.
Absolutely.
So, I'll start with myself. I'm Michelle. I'm a content specialist with Empire Flippers. I'm moderating today, and I have been joined by two very kind gentlemen who are going to walk us through supply chain and logistics. So if you guys want to take it away to your introductions, Blair, if you want to start.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate this. Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to chat the sexiest conversations around, which is about the logistics. So we'll make it fun and exciting for everyone between or else Manish and I will probably go into a banter and we'll get way too technical. But I'm the CMO and the founder of AMZ Prep. So we're a Canadian fulfillment logistics and Amazon hub. So we help a few thousand brands, some from a complete shipping front. We work with almost all the major aggregators, a lot of the acquisition firms, and a lot of the really large .com sellers. When they expand to the Canadian market, we help do that transition, help them with the setup and also with the logistics up here. So we get a really cool perspective from some of the bird's eye view, but we also we're the Canadian boys up here. So it's super exciting. We're still a relatively young company, but things are moving really, really quickly. So our domain is right in this Amazon ecosystem. So the warehouse is right behind me. Don't be fooled by the white walls. There's a lot of noise to be made, but I'm super excited to chat with everyone here. Manish, you can definitely do a better intro. I'd love to hear it.
Well, it's hard to follow after that one, Blair, but I'll try. My name is Manish Chowdhury. I'm the founder and CEO of Cahoot. Cahoot is the world's first peer-to-peer order fulfillment network. By that, what I mean is we help online brands and retailers fulfill orders using whatever channel they sell on, and using whatever SLA they wish to target. So Cahoot has a network of warehouses throughout the US right now, and we service clients throughout the world. And what's unique about Cahoot is, as I mentioned, peer-to-peer order fulfillment network, where a lot of our warehouses actually belong to other sellers. So if there are any sellers in the room that have warehouse space that they wish to monetize for the very first time, Cahoot has the organized approach. It's similar to what Airbnb did. If you had a spare room or you had a spare apartment, you can start making money. And because of our unique model, Cahoot is lower cost by design than traditional 3PLs. And we also have the industry's highest fulfillment standards. By that, what I mean is Cahoot supports Amazon sellers, it supports Shopify sellers, it supports any seller selling anywhere. But specifically, in addition to others, we support Amazon Seller Fulfill Prime, which is a program that that's the gold standard in fulfillment, because you need to have 99.5% on-time shipping. The bar is very high. 6-day fulfillment, so you need to ship on weekends. You need to get the orders out the same day, and you need to have almost near zero defect. So that is what Cahoot does. And Cahoot acts as a full service partner for a lot of our clients, where we would also send the inventory to FBA if the seller wants, and we would also act as the FBM backup at all times, or also provide FBM services for large, bulky, special items that may or may not be suitable for FBA. So we help the sellers wherever they sell.
That's excellent. Well, thank you very much for that, you guys. Let's kind of get it started off, because, I'm sure that we have a lot of people who are watching who are, at various points in their journey with e-commerce. So for the people who are just starting out or are thinking about starting out, when would you guys say is the best time for a seller to start really considering their supply chain and their logistics?
Manish, start, and then I'll try to piggyback on some of the great answers you'll give. I won't do this all presentation. I promise. I'll take the next one.
I think that's cool. I think the sellers need to think about even before they begin, right? Because the shipping and fulfillment cost is such an important and such a material portion of the overall cost that you have to factor that into your business model even before you produce the item. What price are you going to sell it at? What is going to be your advertising cost? What is going to be your fulfillment cost? How are you going to source it? Where is it going to come from? How are you going to fulfill that? And the sellers that don't take the time to figure this out, they might have a great product, but it may not be a great business. And I think that is a very, very important component, because as you think about Amazon and FBA, like, if your product is in the small and light category, is it priced accordingly? Can you make the economics work? So, Blair, you can chime in, but to me, that investigation begins even before you decide to produce your item.
Yeah, you're bang on. I almost think of it as like it's like eating your vegetables, right? Manish, it's like, of course, and I think from a sound perspective, everyone should be thinking about it beforehand, but I think usually the sellers and brands won't. Maybe because it's not the fun part, almost like the bookkeeping or financials. A lot of sellers and brands, they'll leave it to the last second at the end of the year when they have to do their taxes and the man's following up. And I think about logistics and strategy in a pretty similar situation where everyone knows you need to think about it, but very little sellers will actually go ahead and execute. What we've seen, and maybe it's unique on the Canadian side, but traditionally brands where we've seen the biggest downfall is that everyone has kind of their core and vision of what your dream team looks like, especially if you are building a D2C business or just an Amazon brand. Inside that kind of dream team, there's usually never anyone who's dedicated towards supply chain. You might be either outsourcing it, you might be relying on your 3PL partner to handle your supply chain, or you might have your marketing manager just make sure there's no stockouts, right? And replenish from the warehouse. But traditionally what people lack, I think, from kind of that 0 to that $1 million mark, they don't have anyone dedicated. They take a very kind of half-baked approach instead of hiring someone to be dedicated and built for this. And that's really what we've seen the good to the great businesses, or when they go from that 1 million to the 8-figure mark, is that usually it's more of like a logistics infrastructure issue. It's not that their ads aren't performing well enough. There's too big of a gap. It's more about usually like they're having stockouts, they can't get product fast enough. And we've seen the best brands that actually recruit someone for fulfillment, logistics, inventory planning as early as possible. Obviously, it's a budget thing, so it's not always the perfect scenario. But the second that they're able to, usually we see brands wait until you're out of stock and have all these issues, or you have inventory restrictions, and then you start looking, and you're 3 to 5 months out from before finding someone talented. So it's a very backwards forward approach that brands take. But I do get it. It's the broccolis with the chicken and rice that just usually people don't want to talk about till it's too late.
No, for sure. And, I think too, it's one of those things. A lot of people kind of come from a like retail arbitrage model and then slowly transition to FBA. So a lot of the time they're not even thinking about logistics. They may not even, they just think, oh, well, I'll source this. And then you kind of see like, because I think everyone's kind of struggled with stockouts over the past few years. It's just been sort of an unfortunate side effect of everything going on. But that is one of the things that a lot of our sellers, when we're doing our seller interviews, they say like, well, that's one area that I think could really be tightened up, is just kind of focusing on the supply chain, because, we've experienced stockouts over, even certain things like somebody will launch a new product and they underestimate how well it's going to perform. And then it immediately goes out of stock. And then they're like, oh, and then their rankings are falling, and it's just, it's kind of a mess. So it's one of those things that we hear often from sellers, is that they just need somebody to take the business to the next level. And like you said, maybe have somebody dedicated to just optimizing, the supply chain and logistics. So kind of moving on, what kind of products work for FBA? Because I think it's kind of a misconception that you just, go up on Jungle Scout and find a product and then just start selling that because it seems to be popular. But obviously there are some products that really just don't work well with this type of model. So which products are good for it? Which ones would you say maybe people should steer clear of?
Well, maybe I'll take the easy part, and I'll hand over the tough one to Blair. Of course, Amazon is FBA is awesome for small and light. That's their bread and butter. If your product is classified in that small and light category, frankly, nobody can beat those prices if you have sufficient inventory limits. I think, and you get the Prime badge, that's very suitable. What it's not suitable for is larger, bulky items. And I would make broader generalization on what I call small and light. Under 5 pounds, as long as your product is not oversized, you're going to get a good deal from Amazon. The minute it gets, to anything special, whether it's hazardous items containing lithium batteries, bulky items, and of course now Amazon has storage type limits. They went from ASIN type limits to storage type limits. You got products that are standard, oversized, footwear, apparel, flammable, aerosol. Those are the different kind of categories. So you need anything that's flammable, aerosol, all of that is. The other thing I would say, if your product has a high return rate, that is also not a great candidate, because FBA people will just simply authorize the return. You have no opportunity to prevent that return from happening. And what we've seen is returns are generally 20% higher with FBA than FBM, because the FBA reps are not cajoling the customer, helping them. It's like, you want return, here's a return label, let's just do it. But those returns are pretty much, you could have erased the profit from 5 sales in one with that one return, possibly. So that's a high level. I'm sure, Blair, you may have a lot more to add.
This is a great point. Like, I have a love-hate relationship when it comes to FBM, and I see it from kind of both sides of the angle, and especially like you can imagine if we look at the Canadian market, the US, there's a lot more feasibility, and the reason why is that, and a lot of people listening are assumably going to be US sellers. The density of the states, as you know, Manish, like this, it makes a lot of sense, and the ability to ship from New York to California, there's an opportunity. So, for example, for anyone listening, like the SFP program, it has limited capabilities in Canada, and it's not because the Canadian foundation's not built. It's just Canada's a massive country. The majority of the population lives in a very small subset, which are very populated areas, but Canada's massive. So if you wanted to try to offer 2-day opportunities from Toronto to Nunavut, like the landscape just doesn't you need a plane to get out there, or inside the Rocky Mountains, you need like 3 to 5 days to get it there. So I think there's a lot of key plays, like Manish, you nailed it, of like especially some of the heavier products, if it's batteries, if it's something that maybe you don't know the demand on and you want to get an idea for velocity, that's why FBM is always a great solution. I encourage all brands, especially because of the dynamic. Everyone got punched in the face at some point over the last 2 years with their Amazon fulfillment and their inventory. So I think it's a very arrogant approach to not have FBM available. Does that mean that you have to turn it on? No, but it means that you need to be able to toggle. You need to be dynamic. Amazon's moving faster than ever before. And today you could have stock. November 3rd, you might not be able to. And if you don't have FBM already set up, whether it's ready for your garage, whether it's in one of the warehouses, whether it's in a partnered warehouse like a 3PL, that ability to be able to just flip the light switch on and off. If you ask your warehousing partner in November to try to switch over to FBM, it's traditionally not as easy, especially for bigger warehouses, because they need to set up the picking bins. There's new locations. They have software involved. So this is why I always encourage brands now, especially with Q4, make sure it's set up. But I think the one thing that a lot of brands just don't look at, Manish, you nailed it, was that kind of the total cost. Like, we do a lot of exercises to show brands the connection between advertising and fulfillment, because people look at this in a very disassociated way when really they talk to each other in full harmony. Is that when people are looking at their profitability on Amazon, they're usually not considering the freight that it comes to, or that actual return processing fee, and what that cost of shipping it back to the customer, or your customer support shipping a new label, or the cost for your product inside of a 3PL warehouse and the storage there. So you got to make sure that if you do select to go to an FBM route, that you have the margins to be able to do it. Advertising reacts a lot differently, and there's a little bit different of a strategy because your conversion's different. So it's just really emphasizing knowing your bottom line. Most people think they have it, but then they go one layer deeper and start accounting all the dimes and nickels, and these usually add up to the downfall. Or when they go to Empire Flippers for a valuation review, it doesn't add up to what they thought it was going to look like. So it's kind of these like impersonated expectations is basically what's happening. And it's tricky, but I recommend having them both for long answer short.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. I'm actually, like you said, everyone's kind of been hit at one point or another over the past 2 years. So, what other ways how the Amazon FBA policies changed over the years, and kind of what does that look like for sellers?
I'll start. I think I'll take us back the memory lane.
We have a good routine going, Manish. Well, I'll let you lead these ones, and I'll jump in after to make myself look better with the answers.
I get to do the easy part, then I hand it over to you. So if you look at Amazon FBA, it has always been in flux, right? I mean, I'm going to take us back 10 years. 2012, that's when Amazon introduced long-term storage on anything that was longer than 90 days. Then later, they introduced storage limits because their warehouses got full and they couldn't take any more. And that was the advent of what they call IPI, Inventory Performance Index. prior to 2012, there was no such thing as inventory performance index. You could send as much as you want because there was ample space. Then, because the space became in short supply, then they started adding long-term storage fee. And then, of course, when the pandemic hit, Amazon does what Amazon does. They stopped shipping non-essential items. They stopped taking non-essential goods altogether. So if you were a seller that doesn't have FBA backup, to Blair's point, you were screwed because your business was shut down, not because people didn't want buying things. Amazon would not take anything that was non-essential, and then the sellers were scrambling. So, we always recommend you got to have a backup because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. And then Amazon increased the IPI score. These are all ways and maneuvers and methods to control the amount of inventory that you receive. And Amazon, of course, does it on a whim. So they changed it from 400 to 500 or 450. And now, of course, recently it's gone back down to 450. So essentially, it's a way to, then they introduced ASIN level limits. I mean, that was a rage, right? That was a problem when anybody launching a new product, they couldn't even send it to Amazon because you could only send 200 units. And if your product was good and you sold out, what are you going to do? Now you had all this money being spent on product launches and all of that, and you could only sell 200 of them. And then long receiving delays. So even if you send new inventory to Amazon, it was taking weeks for it to be received. And then, of course, earlier, about a year ago, last April, I think, Amazon moved from ASIN level limits to storage type limits. And then just last week, they introduced a 5% surcharge on FBA rates, in addition to increasing all the FBA fees in January. So that's kind of the memory lane. So if you think Amazon is your friend and FBA is your friend, it is not. Of course, it's a great service. I mean, we support it. I don't have any, have only high remarks for what FBA does very well. FBA does do really well, but just be aware that this is not going to be the last of the changes. You can expect more changes. FBA is not as cheap as it used to be. I think you got to revisit the math, look at the numbers again, and always have backup. If there's one thing, always have a backup. Blair, over to you.
That's good. That's a good answer. You pretty much hit all the points that I was going to mention there, where it really comes down to it. And I think a lot of people have kind of a bad taste in their mouth about FBM. But I think, Manish, you're bang on. Like, look at the numbers, right? Look at your conversion rate. Look at your advertising conversion. It's difficult when you try to compare it one-to-one if another brand is FBA, because obviously there is some benefits of going prime. But if some of the other competitors are also doing merchant fulfillment, at the end of the day, when there's even playing fields, there's no competitive advantage. So you'll see some categories where a lot of brands are merchant fulfilled, and that's not the deal breaker for them, right? So I think it all depends. One of the things I was going to mention is, obviously, as you went, and I like kind of giving out these tidbits, especially for everyone listening, is that the whole IPI score. I think people have a whole kind of misconception, and there's a lot of cool ways. A lot of sellers know kind of the standard initiatives to impact your IPI score. For anyone who doesn't, that's why I asked the message of, does everyone listening actually know about IPI score? So just for context, it's like a credit score at the end of the day, right? So it basically will determine how much inventory you're able to allocate inside of Amazon. And there's three major ways in one tidbit that I was just going to mention. Number one is obviously, like, with your IPI score, they will measure the inventory turnover. So for a good rule of thumb right now, like, we're bouncing around 30 days worth of stock. In some scenarios, when it was in its peak, we'd only have 5 days of stock or 7 days of stock, because as Manish was saying, you could only send in 200 units at a time. So it was a lot more of these frequent shipments. So we'd create a ton of shipments and then keep injecting. Amazon saw this as a good pulse because the sales turnover was so high. And Amazon measures the sales turnover as days in stock versus inventory fully turning over. So that's one good way. Obviously, any long-term storage, this is going to be key. Rule of thumb, Manish, 90 to 180 days. And then there's the actual hit numbers that are going to really hurt you. If you have inactive listings or returns that went through FBA, I know, Manish, you're going to hate those from the returns perspective. Clear those out of Amazon as quickly as possible, because those are impacting your score. And the one tidbit that a lot of sellers don't look at, and it's just not popular because it's the Canadian piece, is that a lot of sellers use a program called NARF, which is North American Remote Fulfillment. So this means that their products are available on Amazon.ca, but they're inside of a .com warehouse. So what ends up happening is that you only have a certain amount of inventory limit for the US. Let's say it is, as Manish said, 200 units. So if you have NARF also selling on Amazon.ca, you only have one pool of inventory available, which is 200 units. For Canada and the USA is one clump. When you expand to Canada and actually use a Canadian FBA warehouse, those inventory restrictions split. So you'll have a separate amount for Seller Central in Canada, separate amount for Seller Central in .com. And it's not a lot for .ca. Don't think that you're going to miraculously flip things overnight. But if you are struggling with it, like these three tactics, and also like the one that no one speaks about, which is that NARF program, because it all gets congested, we see it with the aggregators because the massive amount of volume or the really big resellers. But even for the small sellers, like the millions are in the pennies. So if you can scrape apart a few of these different strategies, like each one of them will add another 10 products into your limits, especially going into Christmas. These could make or break, or someone finding your product that wants to open a retail store and sell it in the, like you don't know, right? So you just never want to lose those sales, because those what if opportunities are a lot more than the price of the sale, right?
No, absolutely. I think, that is a really important point too, about the difference between using, NARF versus establishing a presence inside a country where you're selling. We've seen the reverse, where it was a primarily Canadian seller who was selling to the US market via that way. And I think, it just would have been more sensible to establish a presence in the US as well. I know that for aggregators, that is one of the first things that they do. That's one way that they just that they use to optimize, the supply chain, is that they will scrap things like that and establish a presence in the country, because it simplifies things. Like you said, you get greater inventory limits, faster shipping times. I mean, it's just it's a logical step. So
any buyer makes sense, right? Like a lot, even on Empire Flippers, like any buyer that's going there wants to see the most opportunity of push, right? So sellers think about that, because it can make all the difference. And if you're looking at selling your business and someone is looking at it, or a buyer off of a VF, like this could be potentially the make or break, right?
So if we could talk for a second about like what inventory forecasting is, and how that plays into your business strategy.
Well, that's a loaded question, because there used to be a time, right, when we lived in this world of just-in-time inventory, where you could simply place an order, submit a PO, and there comes the inventory in 2 weeks from China. Right now, we live in this world called just-in-case inventory, as opposed to just-in-time, because I can share stories after stories. I mean, we had a client that's doing phenomenally well. They had a product that was designed for Easter, and with all the lockdown in China, and then the Chinese New Year, when everything shuts down in China, and combined with the war and all these supply chain issues, and the cost of containers and cost of moving goods, it is a very challenging environment, to say the least. And it's very hard. One thing to keep an eye on is what's the demand for your product? What's the right number to produce to not go out of stock. But of course, just imagine this particular seller that has so much inventory that arrived very close to Easter that they could not sell. Now they're going to have to wait for 12 months. I don't think anybody's buying Easter products right now. So it's a very challenging, doing your ABC analysis, what I like to call, your products. If you have more than one product, if you have a product line, really drilling down at the SKU level, knowing the sales velocity at the SKU level, knowing your margins at the SKU level. And frankly, I see a lot of sellers that extend themselves too thin because they have so many different SKUs, and I'm just dealing with a seller yesterday. They've got more SKUs than sales in a month, and that's a bad sign. That's a bad problem from fulfillment perspective. I mean, Blair, I don't know how you deal with it, but no 3PL wants that long tail SKU that's just not moving. I mean, you wouldn't want it if you were running your own warehouse, because you got to put each one in a separate bin. The cost of maintenance management is very high, and even to manage and maintain those listings. So it's a loaded question, Michelle. I'm sure Blair would have more wisdom to add.
What I always recommend off of kind of the note of inventory forecasting, some sellers don't see the logistics piece of it, right? Especially like a lot of sellers, some sellers don't even see their product, right? And because it's the whole idea of like complete flexibility, complete scalability without send it to a 3PL, they send it to Amazon, the customer gets it. So they don't really get involved. And we did something with Riverbend Consulting. So I was speaking to Leslie, and I was basically just encouraging anyone who's getting into this, do the shipments yourself. Does that mean you need to build a warehouse? No, you have individuals like Manish and I that could do the pain work and the legwork of doing these orders, but I do encourage everyone to do it themselves at least a few times. Understand the process, be able to speak to some level of the lingo. And Manish, you may disagree, but the reason that I say it is that ability to get a pulse of, okay, 100 SKUs actually really does suck. And this is really hard to manage, because if you're doing it in your garage, you're looking around, you send the wrong order out, Amazon dings you because of it, or you're trying to label and you thought labeling took 10 seconds. But really, after everything and setting it up and you hired 4 people, it just gives you a taste, I think, of what's happening, and allows you to also be able to communicate one-to-one with a warehousing partner or a 3PL. Because I know that can be a really difficult synergy, or you use a prep center. When it comes to the answer of the inventory forecasting, yeah, that's a big one. I guess what I've caught, because there's a lot of tools to use inventory forecasting. Again, I always recommend try it yourself. There's a tool inside of Seller Central's platform to do inventory forecasting. It's not great, but it will give you an idea of seller velocity. But there's things you need to consider, right? And there's a lot of gray areas, like the freight times, how long a 3PL is going to take, how long the inbounding. So there is assumptions that you have to account for. You can't just, hey, I think we're going to sell 100 units. Let's ship in 100 units. But I think the biggest concern that I've seen is that a lot of sellers and brands will hire an advertising agency, and they'll have a 3PL. But the communication, the advertising agency might, or if they're doing it in-house or using a software, they are thinking about running campaigns, but they're not considering the inventory behind it. So the 3PL or who's ever managing the inventory, maybe it's the founder or it's the operations manager, they are assuming they're going to sell XYZ over the next 2 months. But the advertising agency has a whole different plan based off of their numbers. They're revamping these campaigns. So there comes this huge disconnect. And what ends up happening is that their stockouts, organic ranking plummets because now their listings are out of stock. The advertising can't get their work done. The brand gets mad at the 3PL because there's no products to fulfill. It becomes this very messy solution because they just don't talk to each other. Usually the logistics comes last versus being prioritized before anything else. So it's not too much on the forecasting side. There's some really cool tools to use. Even things like Helium 10 might be a great way to start. But then there's really more advanced ones once you get into it. And if you guys have ones that you guys want recommendations, let us know. But try it yourself first. Use a Google Sheet if you need to, and try to make some assumptions. It'll just allow you to tangibly see it before you outsource it to a tool or an agency or whatever you end up using as a brand or seller.
I'm glad that you mentioned that about stockouts and your rankings plummeting. It's kind of funny, even like Manish, you were saying that you had your seller who really didn't get their inventory in time for Easter sales. I think, I've come across some people who just seem a bit flippant about reordering. They will say, oh, well, I forgot, or, oh, I didn't have time, and so I had to ship by air instead of by sea, try to rush it in. Or they go, yeah, I've had maybe 4 stockouts over the last year. And you're going, okay, well, what are you doing to address that, so that it doesn't happen in the future? So, could you guys kind of just maybe give a little bit more insight into why stockouts are so damaging for sellers?
I can share. I mean, we've got a really cool webinar. It's in our archives on our website. If anybody wants to learn about IPI, Inventory Performance Index, stockouts, how to improve their IPI score, or even if you want to reach out to Cahoot, we'll be happy to send you a link. It just breaks it down in very, very tactical way what you can do. But let's talk about the danger of stockout, right? So your best seller goes out of stock. Your sales rank goes down. When your sales rank goes down, your sell-through rate goes down, which is the primary factor in your IPI score. And when your IPI score goes down, your storage limits go down. You see the whole cycle. Your best seller goes down, sales rank goes down because of it, sell-through goes down, IPI goes down. Now you can't send inventory, more inventory, or as much inventory as you want for your best seller because it went out of stock. And when your sales rank goes down, you don't get to join the line where you left off. You get to start at the back of the line. So it's not that you can disappear for 2 weeks or a month and then come back where you belong. And this is something we've seen. The product was selling so well, went out of stock for 4 weeks, and it comes back, sales just dried up, especially on a marketplace like Amazon. And even now, Google and other advertising, they're getting very intelligent because it's a sentiment, it's a customer experience sentiment. So Google doesn't want to send a user to a product that is out of stock. So it is quite fatal. And taking into account your supplier lead time. Don't rely on the information that is 3 months old. In fact, I wouldn't rely on information that is 4 weeks old because things are moving so fast. How long, can your supplier deliver? What's your, do you have the container ready? Do you have your freight booked? Once the item arrives on port here, do you have the freight forwarder? I mean, do you have your customs in line that can clear through customs? And how soon can it get into FBA? And how long is it taking FBA to receive items? I've had clients that are complaining it's taking 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and others getting through just fine. So all of those to be accounted for.
The organic ranking is an absolute nightmare. I think in summary, it's not something you want to tamper with, and it really sucks when you go out of stock. Like Manish just nailed, I think, a lot of these indirect impacts that, yes, your BSR, the best sellers ranking, that goes down, and that's what will actually plummet your listing. So if someone's searching up water bottles and you were on page 1 and now you're on page 9, Manish is bang on. Like, you can't just put stock back in and jump right back up the ranking. Sometimes it just doesn't work like that, and Amazon's algorithm won't favor you. So I think it just comes down to, you got to avoid these things at all costs. At the end of the day, your advertising will get impacted, your organic BSR will get impacted, your inventory will get impacted, and no one wins. And also, like, as you look at it from more of a valuation and selling your business, it's one of the worst things that, from an investor, from a purchasing standpoint, when they see these blackout periods, it impacts everything. And you could have spent 6 months working on that ranking to get there organically. And Amazon at the end of the day is going to prioritize customer experience, and a stockout listing is just traditionally not the best scenario. We've also seen some brands that, to avoid the stockout, obviously FBM as a kind of a whole thing, as everyone's been listening, but the other one is that some people have kind of the prepay in advance. You can pre-order the product too. We've seen this be kind of a play to your advantage and disadvantage, because what ends up happening is that people turn on this pre-order. So if they're out of stock, they'll allow these pre-order options. But then when they go into your listing, your conversion rate plummets. Of course, because some people will buy, but a lot of them will go pre-order. Like, there's no way. And sometimes you're actually better off letting it go out of stock, as crazy as that sounds, because then your conversion doesn't get impacted. So either way, like, both scenarios aren't places to be in. In a perfect world, you would avoid both. But at the end of the day, you're in a pandemic. I think you have to look at other options. Maybe it is sourcing locally, whether it is trying to figure out cash to pre-order more in advance and use a warehouse to keep the extra inventory, or maybe the wife will hate you for a couple of weeks and you store it in your garage. Like, at the end of the day, it's Amazon. Get scrappy. You got to figure it out, because if you're looking for growth, this is the easiest way to set you back 6 months, faster than anything else you can do. And you'll see Q4 is coming and people are going to get prepared, and we're going to be having a similar conversation, I know, with all three of us. And at the end of the year, we'll look at this, and the strategic ones will survive, and the ones that thought maybe I'll wait till September to eat my vegetables, it'll be too late. It'll be too late. I want to maybe crop this or something like that right in November, as a little, like, I told you so. I did so many webinars, I did so many podcasts. If they just listened, all of this would have got handled with. But it's the business with Amazon. It's where we deal.
Yeah, it's almost like going to the casino a bit.
Right.
Testing your
exactly.
luck. So what are some logistics optimizations that every seller could do?
I think we covered some of that, Michelle. I think, have a backup. You don't have to, it's sort of like your backup in your computer. You don't want to find out once your hard drive is crashed. That's the when you're looking for the file that you worked on, till 2 a.m. in the morning. It's just a sound practice. As Empire Flipper is one of the strategies. A lot of buyers that will acquire your business, they want to take you from Amazon to omnichannel or multi-channel. So if you're a smart seller, if you already have dipped your toe in that DTC world, that just shows that, and you've got some data, because how do you increase the value of your business is by communicating to the potential buyer that your products are in great demand. And how do you demonstrate operational excellence is by not forgetting the lead times of your supplier, not forgetting to reorder on time, keeping on top of these deadlines, keeping on top of the latest freight rates, hugging your suppliers, even if you are not going to place a new purchase order, staying in touch with them, and then routinely reevaluating your profitability at the SKU level. I would argue, if you're an early stage seller, I know it's a lot of work. And Blair, you said this is the unsexy part of the business. Nobody wants to do it. But, I would say do it monthly. So you know how much money you're making by SKU, and put it on a graph so you can see your profitability per SKU, because that will give you insights into what to cut next quarter, what to focus on, where to double down, what not to do. And then the carrier costs are shifting all the time. I think, if you're paying significantly more than FBA, whether it's to a 3PL, I think reaching out to other providers and simply having them evaluate. At Cahoot, we always routinely provide guidance to sellers that, hey, if you were to use FBM, this is what it would cost. So I think just dispelling the old myths that FBA is the cheapest for everything all the time, not correct, not accurate. FBM is not viable, not accurate. I think sellers need to refresh this information, quarterly or at least twice a year, because of the number of changes that are happening. Over to you, Blair.
I was writing notes as you were saying stuff there too, and I was adding a few. A couple of ones I think from just like tangible takeaways. One is Google Sheets can suck sometimes, and sometimes it's not great. Look at tools, like especially when it comes to profitability. Like there's things like Seller Board is a great example. It's $19.99. Tools like Zonguru, there's Merchant Spring. I think Helium 10 even has a couple things inside of it. Find a tool to look at your profitability. And if the tool can also do like inventory forecasting, don't rely on it, please. But you use this to your advantage. And if you can't figure out $20, there's probably a situation where maybe this doesn't make sense, because it's the investment in the infrastructure, especially if you don't have someone to hire. Second recommendation, if you do over, let's say, 7 figures a year, I'd like to do it at, let's say, like over 50,000 a month. Look into someone to hire for logistics. Does that mean full-time? No, but it means someone that thinks from a different level. We see it with the biggest sellers. And if you're interested, like, and you guys have inspiration, look at some big brands and big sellers. This is what I do all the time, but go to their LinkedIns and see who they're hiring for. It will give you a really good pulse of what these really big companies, whether it is a big Amazon firm, whether it's like an acquisition firm or somewhere in between, or just a really big brand you aspire that's like Amazon based. Look at who they're hiring, and you'll notice pretty quickly a lot of it right now and over the past year has been supply chain, logistics, fulfillment coordinator, so on and so forth. So I think those are two things. Review your 3PL, Manish, bang on. Review if they can do FBM, right? Because if they can't, and September rolls around, you don't have enough time to transfer things out because they're busy and you're busy. Ask your 3PL capabilities of FBM. Can they set it up? Even if it's kind of if it is kind of that backup plan, set it up. It's not fun, but spend the weekend figuring it out or asking those questions or reviewing your partner if you need a secondary one. And does that mean you need to make the switch? Maybe not, but make sure you have them on speed dial in case you need to. Expand to Canada directly. I'm not saying this from a selfish standpoint. I'm saying it from a recommendation. Canada's great. It's still a small amount of the market, but being able to split the inventory is great. NARF, I have a love-hate relationship with. Advertising is a lot better when you expand directly to Canada. And the last one, I would say really educate yourself about your IPI score. A lot of people really don't understand the nuances. Manish has some great resources. I just saw one of the links. Like, really educate yourself. Not surface level, but know on a technical basis, if you are the one handling your fulfillment and inventory, it's a game changer. I talk to a lot of sellers that don't really know how to interpret their IPR. They make some random assumptions of what it is. It's not pixie dust. At the end of the day, it's a technical algorithm that just reviews a suite of data points that you can actually improve each one. And no, it's not fun to review this stuff, but you have to do it. Eat the damn vegetables. I promise you it'll help.
Well, I just kind of wanted to return really quickly to something that you were talking about earlier, which is about, like omnichannel selling, because this is actually, I think, something that we're going to see coming more into play as, when you're looking at what aggregators, for example, are looking for in a business, they will value a business like more highly if the business is already established on another, Shopify, WooCommerce. It doesn't really matter which platform it is, but if they have an established e-commerce presence that, isn't just making up maybe 2% of sales, but is actually a solid part of the business, that will be valued more highly than one that is predominantly at Amazon FBA, because from their perspective, it is far easier to take a Shopify store and convert it, transfer it to an FBA model or incorporate that than it is to go the other way. So, with that being said, I'm kind of curious. We had talked about this before we started the webinar, but I really wanted to get your full thoughts about it now that Amazon has put into beta testing that they are going to offer Prime for Shopify sales, how this is going to impact what you do, what you guys kind of think about it. Is this a good move for sellers? I know you got some thoughts. So Manish, you had some pretty strong thoughts about it.
Well, I mean, the program is still very new. What it's called Buy with Prime. So you can install a widget on your product page, on your checkout, and the Prime subscriber can take advantage of their Prime membership and qualify for same free 2-day shipping. That's what the program is. And from a seller's perspective, of course, the seller needs to have their inventory in FBA in order for that particular product to be eligible. That's the high level definition of the program. Based on what we know very little. I think that the details are not clear. It's not much different than, from a seller's perspective, than multi-channel fulfillment that Amazon has had for years. Amazon charges more for multi-channel fulfillment than on their own website. So we are conjecturing that by letting the seller put Amazon branding on their website they might take away that extra fee. But some concerns that sellers need to be aware of is, why do you set up a DTC store, right? Why do you set up a Shopify store? Is because you want to own that customer. You want to market to that customer. And it's unclear that if my checkout is going to be powered by Amazon, will I own that customer? Will I be able to market to that customer? I'm doing all the hard work as a seller, paying for marketing, organic SEO, and now I'm sending more of my customer data to Amazon. If sellers were concerned about Amazon ripping off Amazon Basics, now you've actually invited them inside your house, not just to your front yard or your backyard. Now they know everything. So it's a clever ploy. It's a clever idea. I think we are still trying to make sense of it. We don't believe that platforms like Shopify are likely to allow this on their platform. So again, it's too early to tell, but it's something that you need to watch and observe. There's no real action item for anyone yet, but it's something that we are watching and observing very closely.
Yeah, it comes pretty timely with the Deliver acquisition and like how Shopify is going to play with that. And maybe this is like a combat by Amazon to try to flex their muscles a bit. Amazon, at the end of the day, wants to become the largest delivery network and fulfillment network. So it looks like the objective here is to start taking over that realm. And there's pros and cons to it. Manish, you mentioned it pretty well. Obviously, I guess the biggest conversation is the data piece. Is that your customer or is that Amazon's customer? Because at the end of the day, whether you want to say it or not, if you're selling on Amazon, it's still partially Amazon's customer. You don't control that data the same way, especially if you're going FBA. So that's kind of the big question and concern and what that will potentially look like. From a customer experience, I can also see the other alternative, which you have the Shopify store, but maybe they're not fully trusting and they already have a Prime account because some customers may just only want to buy on Amazon. So I'd be really interested to see what the conversion change would actually look like if they were comfortable with Amazon, but they really love your brand. And I'm going to say TikTok just because I'm really bullish on it and we're talking a lot about it. But if a brand comes from TikTok, they come to your Shopify store, they love you guys, but maybe they're just not comfortable or they don't trust you guys enough yet to purchase. And sometimes that's just the case with new brands, but they are trusting with Amazon. Will that trust badge actually do the difference? And is that worth it in exchange for the data? This one we have to kind of play it on. It's super early to see exactly what that's going to mean. I do see scenarios where it does make a lot of sense. Brands at the end of the day, if they can get off channel, I think this was one of the really big things. We were talking to a few big sellers. We launched this whole podcast. And one of the biggest bets of what they're going to see, the founder of Sellix, he's like, a lot of this initiatives will turn to go off channel. And it's not because Amazon's not the strength play, but one, it just helps with diversifying your portfolio. Two, from a valuation, just buyers are usually more intrigued because you have off channel. So you control the customer and you control the data, which is of course the king. So we're going to see a lot more brands, I think, transfer to a Shopify strategy. That doesn't mean switch 180. Amazon's here to stay. They can't go anywhere. But when it comes down to like offering a secondary solution, I think a lot of brands need to think about it. What do they do, the Amazon connection or not? That's a whole other story and it's very early in development, but from an overall strategy, it's starting to become more of a necessity if you're building a brand versus just building a product on Amazon.
Well, I'm really glad that we got a chance to talk about that because, when that news came out, it was just kind of one of those things. I thought, wow, that's a bold move.
On LinkedIn, it's all everywhere. People love it. People hate it. There's a lot of controversy. Like it's all over the place, and people are making assumptions, I think, really early. People like to get excited out of the gate. There's not enough details on it, and it is invite only. So everyone just hold down the fort a bit. Nothing's changing overnight.
Well, we have a question from one of our attendees who says that he's an aspiring Amazon seller and just wanted to know if you guys could provide him with a walkthrough of how you work. So where would you come in? So if he finalizes a supplier in China, orders X number of units based on a 6-month sales forecast, then what happens?
Manish, take it away.
Well, if you're planning on selling on the Amazon US marketplace or anywhere in the US, I think Cahoot can help. You simply come fill out the contact us form on the Cahoot website. You chat with our rep, create an account, you ship the inventory to Cahoot, and then we can either drip it into FBA for you, and we can also have the FBM option always ready-made available. That's pretty much as simple as it gets. It's all digital. It's think of Cahoot very similar to FBA. You don't have to, once the inventory is with Cahoot, you don't need to worry about how to fulfill it, how to do all that. It's all digital. And I'm sure, Blair, you can handle pretty much all of the Canada side.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is super valuable too is when kind of a seller's thinking of doing this, when you're doing your research, what we've seen is there's almost like this divvy. There's Amazon Prep Centers, and then there's 3PLs, which they can, like, all the jargon kind of gets thrown. And if you're not in the space, I think it can get really intimidating. So just for context of sort of definitions, Manish, you may have your own, just kind of like what it looks like. But traditionally, like, we see there's options for like Amazon Prep Centers. These are usually like small mom and pop warehouses. They're usually a bit more scrappy. There's no software, but they're really quick at turning products over. So if you're doing like arbitrage models, if you're sending some small wholesale orders and you want to be able to talk like over email or calls or actually visit them, like you can call our warehouse way back when. I guess that would be classified as a prep center to some extent. So it's usually smaller, scrappier, a little bit leaner. You get a really close relationship with who you're dealing with. When it comes to 3PL, like, think of this as kind of more like a grander logistics scheme. So when you're looking to elevate your brand, a 3PL traditionally can actually hold your products, can usually do omnichannel. So like connect your Shopify store, do FBM. Like an Amazon Prep Center might not be able to do FBM. They might not be able to fulfill Shopify. If they can, you might not have the inventory visibility. It might be under Google Sheets, or you might get manually sent it. It's just a different infrastructure. And it might be the Prep Center is more cost effective because less overhead, less staff, less software. So every solution's different. From an overall like scheme of things, whether it's a Prep Center, whether it's a 3PL, whether it's your garage, you can just get the stock there. For Amazon, I'm speaking to the new sellers, there's a lot of label compliances and packaging. We've dealt through it. It's not fun, but the FBA labels, the carton labels, the poly bags, the bubble wraps, there's a lot that come into preparation. So if you're selling a shampoo bottle versus a glass jar, the Amazon preparation to make sure you don't get dinged at Amazon's different. So the warehouse will help you do that, and they'll also handle the outbound. So you can be a remote guru. You can be living in Hawaii if you want to, is the idea. So I just think those definitions are super good, especially as people are doing research, because people get it mixed up. I think Manish and I were almost in this like hybrid where I call it like a 3PL, like Amazon focused 3PL. Where like we do all the other ones. A lot of the brands we work with are Amazon based just because it's natural. But we're right in between. Like there's the technical of Amazon, but then there's the strength of 3PL. And if you just go with the 3PL, sometimes they don't have the strength of Amazon. They might not know all the nuances of Amazon, or the weight limits of a box, or the max pallet dimensions, because they're a grand, really large 3PL, and they might just be too expensive and not know Amazon. But then a small prep center might not be able to store a full container as your 6 units turn to 6,000 units. So all things to take a look at, but as you're doing your research, decipher the two, and it'll explain the process a lot easier, I think.
I'm really glad that you made that distinction, though. Yeah, and it's one of those things like as you were saying, with a 3PL, sometimes it can get a little bit too large as well. You don't get that personalized service, which might be really important for somebody who's first starting out. I know I've spoken to, a few sellers who were kind of in the middle of changing out their 3PLs because they just went unresponsive, and it made it a little bit difficult for them to make sure that they were getting what they wanted and kind of the level of service that they thought
it's
they were
scary.
getting. Yeah,
Very scary. Like a new seller getting into it, and you have to trust someone brand new. Like that's where you need someone. There's a lot of noise in the space. Like it's it can be a scary thing. And like for some new sellers, Manish, please, we usually even recommend like send it for shipment to your house. You can always send it to a 3PL after, but like see the product, like trust yourself, learn the process as I emphasized. Now, if it's a couple of pallets, like you might be sleeping on the couch for a few days. But at the end of the day, like figure this process out yourself. Like I love the idea of outsourcing work, but you should always have a good pulse of what it means internally. And Manish, you probably say the same thing of a lot of brands and sellers just don't fully know what goes in behind it. And it'd be so much more fluid of a relationship with their warehousing partner or logistics partner if they really knew what went into the technicalities and they could speak the jargon, they could forecast timelines properly. Or else you get someone that's like, oh, I have 1,000 units. The warehouse must be able to do it in a day, because 1,000 units, if I go like this, that's 3 seconds. So I can do 1,000 in 3 minutes. Okay. So they start working backwards because they don't have the actual context behind it. Does that mean always do it? No, like focus on growing the business. Don't worry about the manual labor involved. But it's always good to have a good pulse, whether it's advertising, fulfillment, anything that you do, try it out yourself first. It'll allow you to kind of get punched in the face so that you're a little bit more nimble as you grow.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. Actually, it's one of those things that I think that by doing it yourself, you get a feel for what will work for you or what won't work for you when you're looking for a provider. So that way you can kind of hopefully, knock on wood, avoid getting burned. It's just like with working with suppliers. It's, you don't just jump on the first one because this person can get it to me cheap. You have no idea, if that's why you order product samples and really try to develop a relationship with that supplier. But I think that's excellent advice. Doing it yourself kind of puts you in it so that you say, well, this is what I'm going to look for in, a logistics provider. We are at the end of our hour. I want to thank you both so much. I actually found this very enlightening. I learned a lot. I hope that the attendees did as well. So we have some information here for anyone who wants to learn more about Cahoot or AMZ Prep. If you guys, I just really want to thank you again for coming on and doing this. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well.
It was amazing. I really appreciate it. Anyone else that wants to connect too, like I'll add over my LinkedIn. So if you have questions, please feel free. Between Manish and I, we can double team it. I think any question that comes our way. So yeah, definitely send us a message. I'm trying to grow the followers too. So anyone connect with me there. I'm really working on it hard. So definitely come and chat. I'm happy to help out with anything. And I know Mesh can say the same things. We'll add a big group chat and we'll strategize together.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, everyone. It was great being here. And we publish a lot of great content. So I'd encourage everyone to follow our LinkedIn page, follow us on Twitter. And of course, there's a lot of great information in our resource library. And I think, Michelle, thank you so much for organizing this and for all the sellers to join. I learned a lot. So I'm looking forward to chatting with more sellers.
And we've put the links to both AMZ Prep and Cahoot in the chat. And then there is a link to the webinar that Manish had mentioned earlier as well, if anyone wants to check that out. I think that it is something that a lot of sellers, especially people who are new to the space or even established sellers, are not aware of, their IPI scores or even where to find them. I've seen that actually quite, they go, oh, well, I don't know what that is, or I don't even know where my inventory limits are. I don't know where I can find that. So go ahead and check that out. I want to thank everybody for coming today. And as I said, this has been recorded, so you will get a copy of it. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful day. And thanks for joining us.
See you guys.
Bye.
See you soon. Bye.